How do you feel about the conference, this conference coming to Latin America, and especially to Colombia?
If you ask me, I don't think that 20 years or 15 years ago, I was even imagining that we were going to have that conference in Colombia. And also coming from the region that I come from, which is the south of Colombia, you don't imagine that you're going to be occupying those spaces. So I think it's important and very significant for myself, more than a Colombian, for someone that comes from a very contested region, to realize that these spaces are actually possible. And in a way, I am amused that this has happened in Colombia. For the people that I have brought with me, and for the communities that are right now with me from different parts of Colombia, just to see them from different regions, from Bajo Cauca Antioqueño, from Coca, from the Amazon, I have come with a very significant group of people. And just the fact that it's not only in Colombia, but also that we have made the effort to bring voices that you never imagined were going to be here. I think that's significant. We are still very few compared to the rest of the people coming, but it's a progress. It's a progress we are doing in that regard.
So you said you are coming from a contested or conflicting region. Can you explain why and how it is conflicted?
I come from Cauca. It's a department in the south of Colombia. It has the largest indigenous population in Colombia, but also has a very significant and large Afro-Colombian and Pasan population. So everyone involved in Colombian politics and history knows what Cauca has meant for the formation of indigenous movements, for the consolidation of Pasan and Afro-descendant movements, and it's a region that has been the place of significant expression, collective expressions, but at the same time, by being multicultural and by being the home of different groups, it has been a place very strategically located to be exterminated. So the situation in the Department of Cauca is very complex, very delicate. And I would say that's not only because of the armed conflict that Colombia has had for several decades. It has been part of a colonial campaign of extermination that has I can date this back to centuries, and it has been always a very contested, disputed region.
In this conference, harm reduction, when we speak about harm reduction, we mostly speak about public health. Mm-hmm. Do you think that this same philosophy can be applied to, for example, the problems of your region?
Harm reduction is a very interesting concept, but it's also it's a complex concept. Usually, harm reduction has been applied, as you mentioned, to public health, and usually has been applied or approached to the user and consumption side, not exactly the production side. And in that regard, even though we belong to the same transnational chain of either we are talking about marijuana, cocaine, heroin, there is a transnational chain: production, distribution, transformation, commercialization, consumption, or use. Every single transnational chain crosses countries across continents. And even though we are the largest, Colombia is the largest cultivator of coca and the largest processor and producer of cocaine, the problems as a producer are way different than the ones that users in the US or in Oceania or in Europe have. In that regard, I think Latin America, I actually think Latin America has been left aside in this discussion of harm reduction because our problems, by definition, tend to be different. In that, having said that, one of the issues in which I'm trying to work more is ecological harm reduction. If we don't work on harm reduction, when we add the ecological, that's even worse. Harm reduction applied to regions in Colombia should really consider the situation of First Nations, original populations, the peasantry, Afro-descendants, and the LGBTQAI+, and many groups more that are from the production side and from the transformation side have suffered different consequences. For example, one in which I am very connected with, toxicity. How toxicity, the exposure to toxicity and chemicals, toxic agents or chemicals in the cultivation and production stages can affect the condition of people growing coca or transforming cocaine. So we definitely have, for example, just in the toxicity side and the agrochemical side, I can guarantee you that we have 1,000 things to discuss. Every single one of them different in each group, and every single one of them different from the discussions that we've had usually abroad.
So if you go to the UN in Vienna, there are many speeches about how illicit cocaine trafficking is damaging the environment, so that's why we need to invest into supply reduction. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about that?
I have been in Vienna, actually, in the Convention of Narcotic Drugs. And even though my position is very complex, as you can imagine, in many issues my position is very complex. While I acknowledge and I understand the efforts in regulation, legalization of things, history has shown us in Colombia, in Peru, in many countries, that a legalization and regulation needs to be discussed since the beginning, and in ways that people, campaigners, usually they don't consider. My position, and it's hard to explain in a couple of minutes, but for example, Colombia, by being the largest grower of coca and processor of cocaine, there is something that Colombia has done a lot, and is very effective on that, creating substitution, eradication, and legalization programs that always fail. Colombia is expert in creating policies. Every single government create a policy working on substitution, regulation, legalization, and eradication that always fail, because they don't consider elements that have to be discussed in the agenda. People are very prone to accept legalization or regulation, but for example, if you don't consider, if you are talking about legalization, and you don't talk about how legalization impact communities that are producing substances related to it, you start creating a mess, which has actually happened. And I don't think I'm speaking theoretically. If you see some of the unexpected consequences of the legalization of cannabis, one of those is the creation of gray markets of marijuana in different regions that cannot access the competitive market of legal substances. There are many issues that have to be considered, and usually for political constraints, political ties, or situations, they are always left aside, and the situation is always the same. The same communities left aside, the same communities impacted in after every single policy. And I think with all my years, I've realized that I'm very skeptical of many of those strategies.
So what would be the solution in your opinion?
It's just hard. The solution implies issues that I don't think the society wants now to acknowledge. I can speak about two. There has to be an entire, whole, comprehensive set of forms of reparation, and recovery for communities that have been affected, and that has to be solved. The amount of intergenerational trauma that has been created in a country such as Colombia, in which more than the war on drugs, the armed conflict has basically washed as and clean as and our territories, that is something that has to be considered in the discussion. Any single solution for advancing in harm reduction, in legalization, in regulation, in anything, has to consider first and foremost ways of current reparation, reconciliation, coping, and repair of social fabric based on the excessive and just absurd amount of trauma that communities have in Colombia. The amount of intergenerational trauma that has been created in all this mess has to be considered. You cannot speak about regulation or legalization in 2025 if we don't consider the amount of acknowledgement, reparation, reconciliation, and relief that needs to be done. And for us to do that implies that we have the economic resources, but we also have a society that is able to accept that, and that's not going to happen. It's not happening. Different countries in the world that I don't want to mention are showing us that this is the society. In many cases, they don't want to acknowledge that. So only in that regard, I might say that there is a absurd amount of work that has to be done just to initiate the discussion. Intergenerational collective trauma for every single racialized, gender, isolated community in Colombia, in Peru, in Brazil, in Bolivia, is something that actually people, they don't even mention. So, and that is just one. That is one strategy, and I think that strategy will require countless resources, and the economic ones might be found. The cultural, psycho-emotional, social ones are the ones that I'm wondering if the society wants them in this discussion, and that is just one. I can continue with many more, and I can speak for days. Just explain to you what other strategies need to be discussed.
Okay. So the U.S. invested a lot of money in eradication campaigns in Colombia. How do you see those campaigns? Were they effective, and what were the impacts on the environment, on the people's lives in Colombia?
I think everyone knows. I mean, I don't have to say anything. I don't have to say anything more than what statistics say. In 2013 or 14, after massive eradication campaigns, early spread of glyphosate, after massive campaigns that lasted more than almost 20 years, we spread around 20 million gallons of glyphosate as part of eradication programs between 1997 and 2020 and 2016. In 2014 or 15, we have between 40 to 60,000 hectares of coca. In 2024, which is last year, Colombia for the first time surpasses the 260,000 hectares of coca. I don't have to say anything. The statistics just speak for itself. After spreading 20 million gallons of glyphosate, after doing massive and ineffective campaigns of eradication across the entire country in different programs, every single government has implemented a new different program of eradication and substitution, and 66 decades after all this, in 2026, Colombia has 260,000 hectares of coca. I don't have to say anything. The statistics just speak for itself. Peru is exactly the same. Peru is about to reach the 100,000 hectares. And Southeast Asia has also reconfigured the market of opium. I don't have to say only what the statistics have to show. And even if I present those statistics and allow them to speak for themselves, people can get the answer. it is so ineffective. It is so unrational, and it creates an absurd amount of problems that that's not going to work. It is not going to work.
Can you talk about those problems, especially the environmental damage?
We have many. And we also need to consider that when we are talking about the environment, we have to speak about ourselves. We are part of the environment. Because usually when we have these discussions on the impact of the war on drugs on the environment, usually is this naturalist conception that the environment is the forest, the jungles, the trees, and the water, which is true. They are part of the environment, but the human body too. And everything spiritual and psycho-emotionally connected to the body and the landscapes have to be considered. There are many. I think we have many reports that have discussed the impact of aerial spraying in Colombia. Colombia is one of the, I guess, is the country that has used that campaign of eradication more often. It is prohibited right now, but for around 20 years, we developed that. The country developed that strategy. I think the cases also speak for itself. The Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights in 2018, they accepted for the first time 2 cases, one in Caquetá in the south of Colombia, one in Tolima in the center of Colombia. For the first time in history, the CIDH accepted the cases in legal, in international law that were assessing the responsibility of the state in not warning the civilian population about the impacts of the strain of glyphosate. And based on those cases, on those 2 cases, one of those involved the death of one of the person washed by glyphosate. Those cases just show you the ecological dimensions. The Inter-American Commission of Human Rights in 2018 accepted 2 cases that happened 20 years ago, in which the whole strategy is sued in order to understand the responsibility of the state in not warning and protecting the civilian population as they should when it comes to the development of aerial campaigns of eradication. That implies that when you spray glyphosate aerially, you just know that's what's going to happen. You spread a very strong pesticide in every single plant that is on the field. You not only attack the Coca plant that shouldn't be attacked by the way. You are attacking every single human and non-human entity around that plant. Plantain, rice, gardens, any single living form and non-living form surrounding that plant, it's attacked. And as part of those attacks, it's the Colombian population. And I think there are several studies developed in different universities and research centers in Colombia that have put the attention on the impacts that, for example, in miscarriages, the aerial eradication of glyphosate actually meant in the existence of collective events of miscarriages, and that is just one of the topics. We can speak about more. The war on drugs and the drug by itself is an extractive industry. When you are attacking one plant of Coca and you are trying to attack or destroy that plant, communities by definition are gonna move that plant, which means the agricultural frontier is going to be expanded, displaced, which means more intervention on ecologically vulnerable landscapes, more intervention on environmentally risky areas. The more you try to contain economies that are considered illicit, the more incentives you are creating for these people to move and push the frontier, which means you are attacking indirectly the preservation of environmentally vulnerable areas.
So this is very. I mean, this is a really good explanation. Thank you. But can you just tell us any kind of personal story or anything? Your encounters with these people, how it affected their lives. Do you have any personal stories you would like to highlight?
It's not exactly that I work on those areas. I come from those areas. So my the region that I was born is and that I grew up is basically in the middle of this whole transnational chain of illicit economies. So basically, my entire life, every single day for me has another experience. And this is something that I mentioned. This is something that I mention quite often. That for many people involved in these fields, this is a job. For me, it's not, because this is what I am actually. This is what I am, and this is what I represent. This is what runs in my blood. This is what I have in my veins. So anecdotes which seem more convenient for people working, anecdotes more than anecdotes in my life. I might say that almost every single day has a different anecdote. That by itself, I think it's an anecdote. But one thing that I want to mention is I'm not going to mention the cases or the places for security reasons. But something very interesting is that when I am having conversations, and when I am walking in different parts of Colombia, and when all this idea of we are trying to, when we are having the discussions of we are trying to leave the world of illicitness and illegality, and governments, civil society, foundations, the very institutional landscape in which we are seated right now is asking for legalization of regulation and all these issues. Something that interestingly has happened in different parts of Colombia is that when I walk and when I assess, both scientifically and for personal reasons, the toxicity and the components of the technical packages of communities that have been asked to leave illicit crops for legal crops, every single transition to legality is more toxic. It's chemically more toxic, more pervasive. So this is an anecdote by itself. In different parts of Colombia, when I am with communities and I'm walking with them, or when I am assessing scientifically or academically technological packages, I have come to the conclusion, when you ask the communities to become legal, you also are making them more prone to be toxically contaminated, which is, I think you need to really wonder that if that is the whole thing of this situation, and that has happened to me in different ways.
So this conference, one of the key messages to divest from punitive drug policies and invest in public health harm reduction oriented policies. Is this message relevant to Colombia, and how is it relevant?
Yes, it is. I think it's relevant for the entire world. We have come to a point in which we just have realized that things have gone in the wrong direction. It's pretty obvious, and something that happened while I think the interview is important, and I am critical of the situation in Colombia. I also know and acknowledge that in my position, I also can enlighten discussions that are in a way positive and still realistic. And what is going on right now in the CND, in the Convention on Narcotic Drugs, that for the first time in history was approved and accepted, that is going to be a committee that is going to assess the inclusion condition of the leaf, the coca leaf, that by itself is telling us there is some hope. Because for the first time in history, in the Convention on Narcotic Drugs, this year in 2025, there was voted positively a resolution in which a commission of experts, of third parties, is going to be created to assess the chemical components and the whole condition of the coca leaf, to acknowledge if it is or not harmful for the society, and if it is harmful. For the first time that is happening. So after all these discussions, we might say there is some hope in a space that has been so close to neglect that possibility, and for the first time having that commission that is gonna assess independently the condition of the coca leaf. That is a huge achievement that has to be highlighted. In that regard, I think if we are countries around the world are realizing that those commissions need to be created and explored, it's because we have getting to a point of realization in which we are basically realize we have just gone in the wrong direction for so long and for so many years that something has to be done. And we cannot do that if we don't have the resources to do that. We might have communities, we might be billionaires on goodwill and feelings, but if we don't have the resources, we don't know how to move. We don't have the capacity to move. And reallocating resources from the traditional punitive measures to different harm reduction, civilian, community-led approaches, that definitely it's gonna create a new landscape. It's going to create, of course, more conflicts, but at the same time, it's creating new opportunities to try to resolve things that we know today they couldn't be solved.